welcome to another episode of Read It with Whiskey. I am your host, Laura Juntunen, and today's guest is Colleen Forbes. Colleen Forbes is an author based in the greater Seattle area where she loves to write fairy tale retellings. In addition to writing, she's also a part-time librarian, grad student, and a full-time follower of Jesus. When not reading in her home library, which is hidden behind a secret bookshelf door, how cool is that? When she's not reading in her home library, you can find her having adventures with her Black Labrador Retriever, Lila. And Lila will make a little appearance in our episode. So Colleen and I had a great time talking about her book, The Cursed Queen, which is the first book in a 4-part series. The series is called The Lyrian Alliance, and they are all retellings of common fairy tales. So this book is based off of or inspired by Beauty and the Beast. So let's get into this interview. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, an interview podcast highlighting self-published authors. I am your host, Laura Juntunen. The purpose behind this podcast is to help authors grow their audience while also introducing readers to their new favorite authors. Let's get to know the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. Before we get into the episode with Colleen today, I wanted to just reach out and let you know that if you are really enjoying this podcast and you want it to keep going, there is a way that you can participate. So I have a Patreon account, which is a great tool for podcasters or creators to find a way for people to help them if they want to be helpful to them, basically. So it's a great platform where you can donate a few dollars a month to help creatives with their entrepreneurship journey. There's so many people who use the platform, and I have jumped on because I know there's a lot of people who've been asking, how can I help you grow? How can I help you reach more self-published authors? And that is the purpose behind this podcast, is to help these self-published authors, these indie authors, to help them grow and find their audience, but also for the listener. So if you are a listener and you're just an avid reader, then definitely this podcast is for you, because you're going to learn about so many different types of books and genres, all written by self-published authors. So I help the author find the reader and the reader find the author, and I love where this podcast is going so far. So if you would like to support me and help me to grow this podcast into something larger, please go to my Patreon account at patreon.com/readitwithwhiskey. There's multiple different tiers that you can become a part of. There is a plain old listener tier if you just want to support me on the journey. There is a listener plus tier where you will actually get some bonus episodes that won't be here on our regular podcasting stations. And there is also the book club tier, which is the Read It with Whiskey book club membership. So that is where the book club is held, and that gives you voting rights. So if you are interested in deciding which books we're going to talk about within the book club, that is the membership tier that you want to be a part of. The book club is coming very soon, so keep your eyes and ears out and go ahead and join that Patreon membership if you are interested. And another huge part of the book club membership is the Q&A with the author. So after we have a few episodes up here, I'm going to have the voting privileges open, so all of the book club members can vote on which book they want to have for their book club book. And the author of that book is going to do a live Q&A where we go into all of the nitty-gritty details of what the book is about. So obviously here in the podcast, we don't do any spoilers, but in the Q&A sessions, we go into all the spoilers. We talk about everything. So if you're interested in learning more about the book in depth, and you want to talk about those spoilers, then this is definitely the place for you. And finally, before we jump into the interview, I'm sorry, I'm almost done, guys. We're going to get there. Colleen will wait for us, I promise. I just wanted to give you a little Laura J. Live update. So I'm still in the editing phases for my book, which is the first in a series of at least 3 books, possibly 6. I haven't decided yet, but I'm currently looking for ARC readers. So ARC readers are advanced reader copy holders, and they get the book before everybody else. They get to have the book at complimentary. I'm just going to send you the book, and you're going to read it. Let me know what you think. Put a review on Amazon, and you'll be the first one to read it. So if you're interested in being an ARC reader for my upcoming book, I haven't released the title yet, but I will say it's a little bit of a future-based book. If you're interested in learning more about the book or becoming an ARC reader, let me know and contact me directly via email. The link or the email will be in the description box below, or you can visit my website, www.laurajlive.com. I hope to get a bunch of submissions for ARC readers because I do want to have quite a few people read the book before it gets published. So let me know, and without further ado, let's tune in with Colleen. All right, Colleen, welcome to Read It with Whiskey. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're just going to jump straight in. So why did you become a writer? What is the inspiration behind that?
I mean, like, I've always loved stories and, like, stay up late reading, and there'd be times too where, like, right before falling asleep when I was a kid, I would tell myself my own stories just for fun. And so, like, each night it would be like a continuation of the night before. But yeah, like, I guess now it's been a couple years. I had a lot of time on my hands and I was like, oh, I can write a book now that I have this time. So that's
very
when
cool.
I dived in.
I love it. And today we're going to talk primarily about this is your first book, right? The Cursed Queen.
Yep.
And I was so excited to get my copy. And when is the publication date?
It came out December 8th. I had originally thought about February, but then I was like, oh, everything's ready. I might as well since it's self-published.
I love it. That's so exciting. So tell our listeners, what is the genre of this book? What is it about? What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, so, oh my goodness. It's young adult fantasy, maybe young adult. It's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And so it's been my favorite fairy tale ever. And so the first book I decided to write, I was like, oh, it has to be Beauty and the Beast. But so there was a couple different inspirations for this particular telling because it's a different take. I mean, for starters, he's a dog, and he didn't get cursed because he was like had a bad personality or like a lesson for him, but it was more because she had more or less hardened her heart against love because like really bad relationship. But it all kind of like was inspired by taking my dog to the dog park one day. And I was just like, oh, okay, so I'm going to write this book. What's it going to be about? And I was looking at all the dogs. I was like, oh, he could turn into a dog.
I love that because in the traditional Beauty and the Beast, obviously, like you just said, the guy's the one who did something wrong to turn into the beast. And you learned very quickly that it's not the case in your book. I loved how it mirrors, though, because I'm a Disney fan. I love all things Disney.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that really drew me towards your book, was because I love retelling the Disney stories or the traditional stories that you hear. So what was the writing process like for you? Because you started writing, what was it, 2019?
Yeah, January of 2019. So yeah, 2 years.
2 years. So what was that like?
Well, it was more like, okay, I wanted to like figure out who these characters were. Wanted to like figure out the plot initially, and then just started writing very linearly, just like, okay, this is chapter 1, this is chapter 2. Except for like trying not to do spoilers, except for like one of the flashback scenes, like the main motivation as to how she gets cursed or decides to get cursed. That I kind of wrote pretty quickly because I was just like, or first because of like, okay, this is kind of like the pivotal motivation for her. I was like, so if I write this down, really get into her head, then it should set the tone for the rest of the book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I love it. Ooh, I'm excited for people to read it. And so it's been published since December, and you self-published. And what was the reason, what was the motivation behind self-publishing versus traditional?
I mean, like there's always a part of me that was like, oh, like traditional publishing, it kind of feels like you won a lottery kind of thing.
Right.
If you went that way. But so like kind of, so this is the first book in a retelling series, and there's so many of those kinds on self-publishing and like Kindle Unlimited, those kind of genres, and like the market is more in there rather than traditional publishing. So I decided to go that route, in the sense like that's kind of where people know to look for it.
Right.
So
right. And you said, so there's going to be 4 in the series.
mm-hmm.
And can you tell us what the other books are going to be about, like the equivalent stories, or is that a secret?
Yeah. Oh no, it's not a secret. Except for the 4th book. That's kind of a secret against myself. In the sense I'm like, there's a couple different ones. I'm like, which one do I pick? So book 2, which I'm writing right now, is a mix between Swan Lake and The Wild Swans. Which is an Andersen fairy tale. Like all the brothers turn into swans, and the sister has to like knit these shirts with stinging nettles, and has to be quiet the whole time. So just the knitting of the stinging nettles part was like, oh, that's a better way of breaking a curse than true love. I don't know.
Right?
Like,
yeah, it's a different spin on the traditional fairy tale.
Yeah. But like Swan Lake, it's going to be following Cress, which is the best friend of the main character in the first book.
That was going to be my next question.
Yep.
What character goes into it?
Yeah, so it's going to be Cress. I love her.
Mm-hmm.
So she and Garrett end up turning into swans. The 3rd book is about Sophia, which is the sister of the main guy in the first book. Okay, Ravana and Liam. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
Barking.
The irony that it started barking when you said Liam.
Yeah. I'm just like, oh, Lila. I love her. Anyways, so yeah, the 3rd book is going to be a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but it's mostly inspired by Jane Austen's Persuasion.
Ooh.
Because that is my favorite Jane Austen book.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I'm so excited. So the 2nd one is coming out this fall, or are you planning on maybe bringing that one up like you did this one?
Oh no, I have no time to bring it up.
Okay.
It's fall. Although, if you notice in the back, it just says fall of 2021.
Yeah.
It doesn't give an actual date, because I'm like, technically fall is from September 22nd to December 22nd.
I saw that. I was like, oh, that's kind of vague, but it might be on purpose. Yeah. I love it.
Like, we can just do a season, 2 months of leeway.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So, okay. So this book came out in December, a little earlier than planned. So how did you feel when you had that first proof in your hands, the physical book?
Gosh. I just kind of started crying a little bit, and I just like was hugging it, and I was just like showing it to my dog Lila. I'm like, look, it's a book. And ended up actually just like taking a second to like sit and just like pet it, because I'm just like, is it real? Is it a thing? And so then I just walked around my house just holding it, just like I live by myself with the dog. So thankfully no one was around to like see me being weird, but I was just like, oh, this is so great.
I was the total opposite. Obviously I cried and like had like a meltdown because I was so happy, but I had my book and I brought it with me everywhere. And I was like, look at my book. I published a book, and I was showing everybody.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely made several phone calls.
Yeah.
But I was just like, yeah. And then when the hard copy came in for the first time, it was kind of similar. Like I didn't quite cry because like I had that moment.
Right.
But I was still like holding on to it, taking pictures, like sending it to people. I'm like, oh my gosh, look, isn't it beautiful?
It is beautiful. And I was actually going to ask you about that. So it's a beautiful book. Like, it's so eye-catching. Every time you put anything on Instagram, I'm like, oh, there it is. It's just so pretty. So where did that inspiration come from? Did your cover designer do it from scratch, or did you have an idea?
Yeah. So like, shout out to demonza.com, because they were amazing. Like, I have no credit whatsoever other than the fact that so again, like self-published authors and like the genre of like retelling fairy tales where it's standalone but overarching plot for the whole series. For whatever reason, the way you can tell it's going to be that kind of book is like there's the main girl in the middle, like some sort of like foresty background or some pretty background. I don't know. So they're like, oh, is there anything that you're looking for specifically? I was like, this apparently, because that's just the type of background or cover for this genre.
Right. It just matches.
Yeah. And so I was just like, this is what she looks like. This is what he looks like. I am not artistic at all. So they gave 2 covers, like drafts or whatever. And I was like, oh, this one's pretty. And then other than like a few critiques, I was like, well, technically she doesn't look like this. And then they came back and again, it was kind of like that crying. And my church does social distance services now.
Okay.
And so it was around the time where like I actually got to see people in person again. And so like that's when I like showed people the cover. I was like, look at this. It's a real book. But yeah, no, they did an amazing job. People are like, oh, it's a gorgeous cover. I'm like, I know, I had nothing other than saying
nothing to do with it. Yeah. But you got to pick the final, what it actually looked like.
Yeah,
and it's so
perfect.
All I have. You got to put the check mark. Yep, I want that one.
Yeah, that's basically all I did for it.
But it definitely fits the theme, the genre, and I think that's why I was so drawn to it, is because like I looked at it and I knew it had something to do with the fairy tale, even though like I hadn't read the back or anything. It just fits so perfectly. So I love it. Okay, so you said you're not creative at all. So what do you do? Are you a full-time author? Tell our listeners, what do you do for a living?
So I think I told you before. It's kind of a mess right now. I'm a consultant for a computer company or a tech company. So my undergrad was computer science. I'm also in grad school for library science because eventually I want to make that career shift to become a librarian, which means I'm also interning 8 hours a week at a library for a resident community. Yeah, and then also writing, publishing. Some of my friends are just like, you're kind of crazy right now. And I'm like, I know. I only have Sundays to sleep in because like I'm going to the Saturday services.
Right. Yeah. But, well, I'm glad you made time to be on the podcast. So thank you. You sound like you're so busy.
Yeah, no, like I thought this was cool. Like I was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm excited for what your vision is and getting self-published authors to be on a podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I love the idea of, because obviously the self-publishing community is so collaborative and we just help each other. And I have found so many people through your Instagram page and through other people who have interviewed, and everyone just loves to help each other. So it's something that I wanted to do for other self-published authors, is help them to find their audience. So hopefully our listeners get to know you better, and by getting to know you, that makes them want to read your books. So that's the whole concept behind it. And so, yeah, I'm just so glad that you decided to come on.
Yeah, I thought it was important.
Yeah. All right. So tell us something that your readers do not know about you.
Oh, my sister likes to say that I'm an unassuming adrenaline junkie. Because like when most people like meet me or whatever, they're like, oh, this is the shy, quiet, nerdy girl who like loves books.
Right. Traditional librarian persona. Yeah.
Totally unassuming. But then they're like, oh, she went skydiving twice. Oh, she summited a couple mountains, like hiked 52, like a couple years ago, there was this 52 hike challenge where you had to hike once a week. And get 52 hikes in a year.
That's incredible.
So, yeah. That was also a year of no sleeping in whatsoever.
Oh
no. Like Saturday, hiking day. But yeah, like those kind of random things so it's like that is one of those things that people are like, oh, she is kind of not super quiet and a little bit more outgoing. Like traveled the world by myself or with friends. But yeah,
I love it. I love it. Was there
She's not this quiet mouse.
Right. Yeah, are you an introvert? Yeah, I could guess. But I'm an introvert too. And so a lot of people think the same of me when they first meet me. I'm really quiet, all that. And then I host a podcast or I speak at an event and they're like, we thought you were an introvert. I was like, oh, I can do that too.
Yeah. I'm an introvert, but that doesn't mean I'm boring.
Exactly. We got to get that message out to the world.
Yeah.
We're cool people too.
Yeah. We just don't like to necessarily like broadcast it all the time.
Exactly. So, okay, so your book has been out since December. What is your favorite review that you've gotten so far? Have there been any like pop out crazy comments or anything?
I think so. Okay, one of the most random reviews, and then I'll go to my like favorite in the sense of, so it's a clean fairy tale or clean romance. And then so someone on Goodreads ended up like giving it 2 stars because there was no sex in it. And I was just like, what? I was like, technically this is a good thing for my book.
Right.
In the sense like, I was like, I guess you're not the targeted audience.
Right. They were looking more for like an adult retelling of a fairy tale.
Yeah, or something steamy or something. And I'm just like, oh. So in that sense, I was just like, this is kind of amusing, but you know. But I think my favorite reviews, just kind of as a whole, are the people who don't actually know me in person. Like, I have like my family and friends, like they're gonna be all like supportive and everything, right. And like I totally appreciate that. Like, not gonna lie. And then there's always the backhanded compliments where like, so we knew we were gonna like it because you wrote it, but I didn't realize I was gonna like it this much. I'm like, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm like, I know what you're trying to say, but like it comes off a slightly different tone. So like my favorite ones are like people who are like super random and just like found my book on accident, or even my ARC readers are like, oh, I love this. And I'm just like, you don't know me and you genuinely like me, my writing.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. But my favorite rating, okay, so this is going to be a little creepy sounding. So like on the author dashboard of Goodreads, you can see like who's currently reading. And so I get curious as to, one, do they actually rate the books they read? Because some people just read and say, oh, I read it, but don't do anything with it.
Right.
And then I'm just like, I need your reviews though. So, but there's this one person who only stars if it's a 5-star read. So like everything else, even if like 4-star, 3-star, 1-star, like they don't do that. They only do 5 stars. And there was only like a few on their thing. And I was just like, oh, I'm just not gonna get a rating from this person. No big deal. And then all of a sudden I got a 5-star rating from them. I was like, they didn't even leave a review whatsoever, but they just rated it 5 stars. And I'm like, this is the highest compliment that I can receive.
Oh my goodness. That's like, so exciting.
Yeah. So shout out to that person.
You know who you are.
Yep.
Like, oh, I love that.
Made my day.
Oh, that's so great. I know. I love when the people come out of the woodwork and you're like, I didn't even know you read my book. Like I had people from high school who I hadn't talked to in over 10 years. And they're like, hey, I read your book. It was great. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even remember who you were.
Yeah, no, there's so many people that come out of the woodwork and you're just like, we haven't talked since graduation of like high school or college. Yeah. So those people are also like noteworthy people. I'm like, thank you so much for taking the time out of your life to remember that I exist and let me know that you also exist.
I love that. I love it. All right, so let's dive in. I had some questions for you. I think we already kind of touched on a few of them, but we'll get into a few more. We're not going to give any spoilers on the podcast episode, but I just wanted to know a few different things about the book. We already talked about the cover and how gorgeous it is. That was going to be one of the questions. But next, who is your favorite character, or who is your favorite character to write in the book?
Okay, so I think I've already said this, but I love Cress.
Mm-hmm.
She's Ravana's best friend. And I just like how, like, even though she was kind of servant and like she starts off as a servant in her career, but then she and Ravana become friends or whatever, that she's like, yeah, sure, you're the queen, but you're my best friend first. I'm gonna treat you like that first. And like with everyone else, she's just like, I don't care about titles. If you're a good person, great. If not, I don't like you.
Right.
And so I just love her.
Do you
But
think you rub off on her? Is there a part of you that's within her? Is that why you like her?
Well, it's kind of weird because like different friends have like, oh, I see Ravana in you, or oh, you like Cress reminds me of you. So I think it's just inevitable. Like some of these people are just these characters are gonna end up having different characteristics of me, which is kind of weird and slightly awkward, but it is what it is. I'm like, I write what I know and I know myself. But I think one of the things that one of the characters I absolutely loved writing too was Ravana, which accidentally named her out of a neighborhood in Seattle, and people are like, oh, it's because you live near Seattle. I'm like, no, it's because there was a Google search. So like I pronounce it in a way that Seattleites do not pronounce it, and I'm just like, this is weird and awkward all at once.
So you pronounce it Ravana. How do they pronounce it?
Ravenna.
Ravenna? Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, which is technically the street and neighborhood name, and I'm just like, oof. Well, Ravana is stuck in my head for 2 years. I can't change it now.
Right, exactly. That's who she is. You can name her something different if you tried.
Yeah.
And she was a great main character. I liked the angst that was in her throughout her process. I think my favorite, I had so many favorite characters though. I liked everybody, but I really liked Tatiana because I feel like, I don't know if she's going to come back in future books or not. Yeah, maybe. But I feel like she just knows a lot more than we do. And I like when characters have secrets. And so she always really intrigued me.
Yeah. So actually, when I was thinking through series names, okay, because again, not super artistic or good at naming things. Like there was so many times where I was just like, Google name generator fantasy worlds.
Score.
Yeah. So a good majority of these fantasy realms and countries are from a generator. But so I was like, oh, maybe the Godmother Chronicles or series, because like she is gonna have, like, she's kind of that character that's gonna like be like prompting things, if that makes sense. And so I have a few different ideas for her at the end of the last book. But again, like I just have a general idea of the last book. I don't even have like the fairy tale specifically picked out.
Right.
But like she's important and she knows things, but it's just a matter of like, okay, how much is she gonna be there? Like she's gonna be in the second book and the third book, or whatever. But we shall see what she knows.
Yeah, I'm so excited to find out.
Yep.
Yeah, she's definitely one of my, I like that she instigates things, but she's also like supportive of everything that's going on at the same time. And speaking of the world, how did you come up with the world? Because in the book, there's an entire map. And there's like all of these different countries, and we haven't really met all the different countries. So I'm guessing they're going to come back.
Yes.
And we just heard that the names of these countries were basically found on Google, which is awesome. But then on top of that, it says the known world. Are we going to find out if there's an unknown world? Like, is there more to this world?
Yeah. So this is okay. This is kind of. Well,
you don't have to do spoilers. You don't have to say anything.
There's no spoilers at all, other than the fact that like I had planned out these 4 books, but I always like I didn't want to box myself in, and so like I did like the idea of like maybe like beyond the desert or on the other side of this mountain range there would be more countries, And initially I had thought about 6 different books, and like they would take place in all the different countries.
Okay.
But like I hadn't quite figured out how it all worked, because like this one particular plot, like the overarching plot with like the raiders, and raiders, outlaws. I keep on switching when I was writing as to what I was calling them. I was like, I don't actually remember what they are in the published copy.
I'm pretty sure they were raiders. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, I was like, this sounds right.
Wait, we know what you mean though. Well, your readers will know what you mean once they read the book.
Yeah, so like there was going to be 6 different fairy tales overarching like different countries, and so it was like, so in that sense I didn't want to box myself in. I was like, oh, if for whatever reason I end up being inspired about other things, like I can pull in countries that are not in the known world. But as for the actual map, like I gotta also shout out to Hannah Sandvig. She is amazing, because again, not artistic, but she was like, oh, can I have like a little, like maybe a drawing that you can give as like rough idea of what you're thinking? And
right.
I was like,
yeah. No, I can't do that. No.
I was like, good luck. Here it is. And she worked magic, as you can tell. The map is amazing.
It is. It's so beautiful.
But yeah. Oh, also I need to say, Siren's Lament webtoons. It's like comic thing. Lyra, so the main country, is named after the main character from that webtoon.
Well, there you go. If we've got some listeners, got some fan tags right there.
Yeah, I'm just like, I was like, people need to know. I was like, that is how I picked that name, and then everything else is like generated from Google.
I love it. I love it. Okay, awesome. I just love the maps. That's something that I'm thinking about putting into the next series that I'm writing. So
you should.
I'm gonna definitely go towards the person who helped you out. They are in the book.
Please do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're in
Hannah Sandvig.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Retelling of fairy tales, and her books are also amazing.
Oh, cool. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this because this isn't a part of the Beauty and the Beast traditional story. In your book, our 2 main characters actually communicate through telepathy during the day, or the majority of the time. So where did that idea come from, that these people are going to speak through their thoughts? I thought that was just so original.
Sadly, it's not original. There's another Beauty and the Beast retelling where it's kind of like that. Melanie, oh my gosh, I can never pronounce her last name, but it starts with a C. It's like the 4 Kingdoms, or Beyond the 4 Kingdoms.
Okay.
That series, which is also where I thought about like, oh, if I wanted to write something about foreign countries, like, she's such a great writer. Oh my goodness. Like, she would be like the kind of author where if she was just like, hey, do you want to like meet over tea? I think I would like girl way too much over it.
I love it.
Yeah. But so like the telepathy thing was more along the lines of, I really wanted to make it so it wasn't more like, I wanted this curse to be super inconvenient to the guy. And so only being able to talk to other people during the day through this one woman who, as we've already discussed, she's kind of angsty from being hurt in the past. But like, I kind of like that idea of just, it kind of adds to the pressure of like, should he give up to become human quicker, or is he really going to stick it out? So that's kind of the main motivation behind it.
I love it. I thought that was so great. Now I'm going to have to go and read her books. And
yeah, please do.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other huge part of the book that I definitely wanted to talk about with you is the major theme, or like complete own character of itself, is the whole spiritual component within the book, because that world has its own quote unquote God within this world. So, and how do you pronounce the name they say?
Hosanu?
Like,
hopefully whoever actually knows Hebrew does not hate
okay,
me.
so it is from an actual religious sect or something, or completely, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I didn't know if that was a made-up name or if it was something out of your imagination or Google. So go ahead.
Okay, so it was actually Google too, but there was actually more thought behind this Google search.
Okay.
So for me, it was like always super important to like have Christian themes in whatever I decide to end up writing. So I guess you can say like this is an Aslan kind of character.
Right. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yep. So there was that, but I couldn't figure out like what I wanted to call God in this, or Jesus or whatever, because I was just like again, super important, but this is my confession, I like Christian fiction, but I don't like how it's super in people's faces, because I'm like, this doesn't seem realistic. I don't know.
Yes, no, I totally agree with that.
Okay.
That was what I wanted to say, was that I really enjoyed the fact that there was, because I'm Christian, I use my faith in my everyday life. And so to read a book that I just thought it was going to be a retelling of a fairy tale, to find out that there were spiritual things tied into it was like a breath of fresh air. I was like, oh my goodness, this is just a regular fiction book, but you get to learn about that kind of stuff. And like the traditional Christian fiction is like all just, you know, the first thing you think about, that's what it is. And there's not really any wiggle room. And so this was kind of the first book where I actually felt that there was a way to get around that, like that regular, what am I trying to say? That initial idea of what Christian fiction is, I guess. It just spins it a different way. And I love that.
Yeah. So like that was super important to me. Like I've thought through like all these different ideas of like, I don't know, to me, it's super important to be like, hey, no, like it's not like Christianity is not this perfect, like you have to be this perfect person. Like that's not the point at all. It's
right.
Like Jesus died on the cross for grace, to give grace, so that when you do mess up, he like, you know, like he's still there, because like no one can be perfect all the time. Like it's ridiculous.
Right.
But as for his name, I looked up different names of God in the Old Testament, because like he's referred to as like God the Comforter, or just God who is righteous. And so I was like just looking up those names of like, oh, it's the Hebrew name for maker, because I wanted him to be called the Maker. But I didn't want it to be the Maker as it was in the first draft. I was like, this just doesn't feel right. And so it's always like Jehovah and some attribute. And so the Hebrew word for God the Maker is Jehovah Hosenu. Again, who knows if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And so I just like dropped off Jehovah and just kept the attribute name, just to make it less like I'm stealing from Hebrew. Make it a little bit more obscure.
Yeah, I think it worked. And yeah, in my brain, I pronounced it Hosinu.
Oh yeah.
So
it could be that.
I don't know, but obviously when a reader reads it, they're going to read all the names the way they want to read it anyway. So
yeah, like it was one of those things where I'm like, as an author, I'm like, you pronounce it however you want.
Exactly.
I don't even pronounce it correctly. Obviously, Seattle can attest to this.
Oh, all right. Well, that was all the questions that I had specifically about the book. But it wouldn't be Read It with Whiskey without talking about whiskey for just a little bit. So what's your favorite whiskey?
Okay, so I'm not a whiskey drinker. I do like wine. And for my birthday, I always make myself a mimosa and ice cream and sushi. Like those are the three things for my birthday.
I love it.
but like the whiskey I do like to drink, if it was ever to be presented to me, is Pendleton. But that's more because it's an inside joke for some of my old coworkers on a team that I had worked on in this tech company. So we would always end up with Pendleton whiskey, like Whiskey Fridays or something. And so I'm like, oh, this is what I associate with whiskey.
Right. That's what comes to mind. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, not everyone has to be a whiskey drinker. That's fine. I've been known to have my wino phases where I'm just a wine drinker for a few months. Totally fine. All right. So, Colleen, this has been so much fun. So tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can find your book, and get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah. So my main way of social media is Instagram, author Colleen Forbes. There is technically a Facebook that's connected to it, but it's more for family members who don't have an Instagram, so they can get updates there. You can also find me at my website, ColleenForbes.com, where you can sign up for newsletters, get kind of sneak peeks, giveaways, buy an autographed copy of The Cursed Queen and any other future books. And as for where you can find my books, you can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, basically any bookstore and website, hardback, paperback, ebook, whichever is your preference.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being on Read It with Whiskey, Colleen. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Speaking with Colleen was such a treat. I truly just really enjoyed her book, and I'm really excited to get to know the rest of her series as it progresses on. But like she said, you can find all of her information where she said it, and it's also linked in the description for this episode as well. Just so you get a little insight into what is happening next week, we will be talking to Lori Robinson. So Lori, I met years ago. She used to be a personal training client of mine, actually, and I have helped her through a lot of the things that she talks about in her book. She was divorced after 25 plus years, and she has written a nonfiction book all about how to move past such a big life change. So I have been helping her to edit and proofread, and I've done the formatting for her book, and it is coming out on Valentine's Day. So next week on the 16th, we will be hearing from Lori, and I'm really excited to just dive in and learn a little bit more about where she's coming from behind the book. I've read the book. I've read it multiple times through editing and proofreading, but now I get to ask her all of those nitty-gritty questions. So stay tuned for next week on the 16th when Lori Robinson's episode comes out. All right, we'll see you next time.